All right, so let's jump back in. We're in the home stretch, and so in this last section of the day, if you take a look over on page 32 of your participant manual, we're going to be focusing on this last critical component of the prospecting call plan, which is referred to as the opening statements. So this is where all the work we've done all day long comes to bear in what we actually say when we reach out to this prospect. If you think about the concept of an opening statement, you take a look at this phrase at the top of page 32 up here on the screen. During this initial contact, time is measured not in minutes, but in seconds. How many seconds is it really in today's business world do you think you have? 3, 5, 10, it's not a lot, right? So it's not 45 seconds I'm going to give you. It's a very quick. And so the question becomes, what are you going to say? So putting together all the work we've done all day long in terms of developing our prioritized prospecting list and the research and the getting into defining value from the client's perspective, all that's going to come to bear in actually what we say. And so we're going to focus on being able to really focus on the words that come out of our mouth and what we say in that brief window of time. If you think about a group or an organization who has learned to do this really, really well, tell a whole bunch of information in a short period of time to really help you make a decision, think about the concept of a movie trailer. So think about when you go to the movies in today's world, you know, the movie says it starts at 7:10. It actually starts at, 7:45 because there's a bunch of trailers. And in those trailers, those people have become really good at giving you enough information to be able to decide what? Or not, right? And so if you think about it, they do what we want to do really, really well. So if you think about what makes a movie trailer really, really effective at what it does, a couple things come to mind. So tell me what you think. What makes a movie trailer actually do what it does very well? What comes to mind? What do they do really, really well?
Well, the visuals.
Okay, so visuals. What about the visuals?
They have to be appealing and to be enticing.
Okay, so they focus on enticing you, right? They use visual because it's a movie trailer, so they focus on really bringing you in very, very quick into the plot, right? What else do they do?
Show you a couple of the highlights.
Okay, so sometimes it's almost too much. You almost feel like you've seen the whole movie, but good ones actually give you just enough to kind of tease you to want more or decide that you don't want to see it. And so they do a couple things really, really well. So first of all, think about ones you see. They capture your attention right away. If it's an action movie, boom, they are right into the visuals of the action movie. If it's a love story, they break you right to the point right away as to what the dilemma is the main character is going to face. So that right away, they capture their attention. Is that something you think you're going to want to do in your opening statement? You're going to capture attention right from the get-go. Another thing they do is they create a compelling storyline in a very short period of time. If someone said, well, what's that movie about? You'd be able to go, boom, that's what it's about. They don't take 2 hours to do that. They don't take a half hour. They don't take 5 minutes. They do it in about 30 seconds. They tell you most of the storyline. And then third, they help you to decide whether or not you're going to see the movie. Some of them instantaneous. You're like, oh, man, I got to see that movie. And some of them, you look at it and you go, that's just not me. That's not for me. And they help you to decide that. And so if you think about what makes for an effective movie trailer, it's the exact same things that we want to do in our opening statement. And so we want to take those same characteristics and actually put them into our opening statement. So if you take a look on page 32 in your participant manual, you'll see the concept of opening statements. And so opening statements are actually going to be made up of 2 different parts. And so the first part of the opening statement is going to be what we call the introduction. You can also see this if you actually turn the prospecting call plan you've been working on over. You'll see the whole back is the opening statement. And there's 2 very distinct parts of it. The first is the introduction. What are you going to say in that first 15 seconds to create interest? That's really what the introduction is about. Now, as we focus on introductions today, we're actually going to share with you 3 different types of introductions. There are many others. We're just going to share 3 of them with you. What would that sound like if you were actually calling with a referral? First, what would it sound like if you were already doing business in another part of the organization and you're reaching into a new part of the organization, as well as the third will be, what if it's brand spanking new business? You've never met this person, never done business with them. We'll work on 3 different types. You'll pick one of them and draft your introduction. Once we focus on the introduction, we then turn to the second part, which is actually called the value dialogue. Based on all that research that you did, based on trying to define value from the client's point of view, all that boils down to this statement of the hypothesis for business value. This is what I think we can do for you. Are you willing to have a short conversation about that? Again, we're going to share 3 different types. One is called the third alternative, kind of choice A, choice B. We have a different way of thinking about it. The stop, some things you're going to recommend they stop doing, and what we call the common challenges. As you interact with other people, these are some of the things we see. So for each of the 2 parts, we're going to give you 3 examples. You'll choose from one of them and start drafting an opening statement. We'll share it with some people, get some coaching. That's really the way the rest of the day is going to flow. Now, although in delivering the opening statement, you start with your introduction naturally, it's not a good place to start writing. We actually find it more valuable to start with our value dialogue, get all that thinking in place, and then think about how we're going to open this up. Very much like when you're writing, you get the body down and you think about how am I going to kick this thing off. So we're actually going to start on the value dialogue part, get that down, get some coaching on that, and then come back and think, how am I going to open this thing up? So in thinking about this concept of the value dialogues, if you'll turn over, you can follow along in your book, turn over to page 33. You're going to see this first type. Now again, there's lots of ways you could express value. These are just 3 that are common. As you learn these, one of them may jump to mind in terms of one that you can actually use for the prospect that you've been working on all day long. This first one is called the third alternative. If you take a look at it, the pattern is that researchers tend to believe that there are 2 clear choices. There's choice A in the industry, and there's choice B in the industry. Think of it in terms of dichotomy. Many, many people out there think it's either this or it's this. We, however, think of a third alternative. We believe that it's not A or B, it's actually C. And so you are creating value by saying, hey, in the industry, it's very common that people think it's either this or it's this. We actually have a third alternative way of viewing it. You express that third alternative to the customer, to the prospect, and then you simply invite the discussion. What are your thoughts about having that as an option for your business? And at that point in time, that's where that whole, if we go all the way back to the beginning of the day, that's where that dialogue kicks in. This is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. So I put this statement out there. A lot of people think it's A, think it's B, we think it's C. What do you think about having that third alternative as an option for your business? And then you invite them into the dialogue going forward. And so the third alternative is one of the 3 examples. If you take a look on page 33, this is an example of Maria using the third alternative approach. So take a look at how she wrote this out on the bottom of page 33. It says, today, many experts seem to think of call center networks in only 2 ways. The security risks involved simply do not allow outside firms and organizations to be considered for help in managing networks. Or many think that organizations save the most by totally outsourcing all responsibilities to an outside firm. We believe there's a middle ground that is not being considered by most call centers. We believe that companies should be able to manage their own networks while maximizing the effectiveness and efficiency of shared resources. What are your thoughts about having an additional alternative to managing your own network? So very clearly, the third alternative is, hey, there's A in the marketplace, there's B, we've come up with a C. Tell them what the C is, and then invite them into a dialogue about that. So as we go through each of these value dialogue styles, one of them may jump out as one that will fit for your go-to-market strategy, you actually say, that fits. A lot of people don't consider what we do, and so that might be one for you. And it may not. So let's look at some other options. So the second option is what we call the stop. Stop is over on page 34. Now this one's interesting. Some people find that they like this one, and some people find that it's a little bit too confrontational for them because you're actually telling people, hey, you should stop doing some things. And so again, you may like this one or you may not. The pattern, page 34. We observe that it might make sense for companies like yours to stop doing some things. And you go through the logical things that you're encouraging them to stop. First, we think you should stop this. Second, we think you should stop this. And then you invite them into that dialogue. Would it make a difference for you to change all of this safely, quickly, and inexpensively? That's a closed-ended question. You're looking for the yes or the no, and then you're asking the follow-on question in the dialogue. So if they say yes, say how so. If they say no, say why not. And so you're literally challenging them. You're saying, hey, we've got some things that we bring to market where we're telling people you should probably stop doing some of the stuff you're commonly doing. Express those stops. Ask them if that would add value. When they answer yes or no, that's where the discussion begins. Well, why so or why not as you go forward? Again, take a look at it in sample 2. It says, we have observed over the past couple of years that there are unique opportunities for companies to stop doing a few things. Stop seeing outsource as an opportunity to reduce expenses. Stop outsourcing key people who have unique knowledge of company culture that's very hard, if not impossible, to create. And stop thinking of outsourcing as a last resort. Do you think it would make a difference to your organization if people adopted similar views as this? And again, that's a very intentional closed-ended question. They're going to answer yes or no, and then that's where the dialogue begins. If they say yes, say, well, how so? How do you think that would impact your organization? The dialogue begins. If they say no, say, well, why not? What are you seeing that those would not be beneficial to you? And the dialogue begins from there. So second option, again, as you're going through this, you'll find one of them that you like. And then the third is what we call common challenges. And so in the common challenges, you see the pattern at the top of page 35. When we talk with other, fill in the level of the person you're referring to. So as we talk with other CIOs, we find that they tend to be experiencing some common challenges. One is that they, and you just list the common challenges. Now, where would these common challenges maybe come from? Could be from the market, third parties. Where else? The issues you identified earlier. Remember we said get that list extensive? Because if I can get that list complete and think it through and get some marketing involved and implementation and some new people and some veterans and really get a good list, then I can really think through, well, of these issues, which one would the CIO be focused on? You could probably pick out 3 in there that are very, very typical for the business world today. And as I approach you, I say, hey, as we deal with other CIOs, 3 common challenges we see are, and you exemplify those 3. And then you invite the discussion. Are any of these an issue for you? If yes, if we had some ideas that we could offer value around these challenges, would that be worth 20 minutes of your time to explore? And if no, they say, no, none of those are challenges for me. Perhaps you're experiencing some other challenges. Do you mind sharing what they are? If you've done that skill, that mindset tool, getting into the mindset of the value from the client's point of view, what do you think are the odds that one of those 3 is going to actually tweak the interest of that prospect? It's most likely going to happen, right? Because you've done a lot of work. And so from that standpoint, you're pretty convinced at this point, if you lay those 3 challenges out there, at least one, if not all of them, are going to be issues that they're focused on as well, and the dialogue begins. Again, you see the example down on the bottom of page 35. I've done some initial research, and while your situation will be unique, I've noticed 3 trends in what other sales executives are experiencing. They aren't getting the growth that's needed and expected. There are key performance measures that need to improve, and there is limited or delayed access to key customer information, which is hurting revenue per customer. May I ask how you are currently addressing these areas? And so again, you see the value that I'm presenting to you some areas that I'm pretty darn confident you're challenged with as well, and then inviting the discussion about that. 3 ways or styles of creating a value dialogue. What we want to do is actually have you take one of these 3 and begin to do some work. So if you take a look over on page 36 and on the back of your current prospecting call plan. Again, we're not starting in the first section, 1, we're starting in the second section, number 2. Although we start with 1 when we actually do it, we start with 2 in the creation. What we want you to do is think about your prospect you've been working on all day long. Think about the getting into the mindset and creating value from the client's point of view work that you've done. Think about those 3 styles of value dialogues and choose one. What we want you to do is focus on drafting your opening statement. Now, why do you think I emphasize the word drafting? It's a draft, right? This is not the final production. We're going to give you maybe 5 minutes to draft this thing out. Now, I do want you to have something in writing, because when you're done with this, I'm going to have you partner with someone new, share it, and receive some very specific coaching that we want you to redraft your value dialogue with. Later, you're going to share your redrafted version with someone else. Like I said, when we leave here, we want to be at the place that this is ready to execute. And so you're going to have an opportunity to get some real coaching as we go forward. So as we go into this piece, we want you to focus on choosing one of those 3 styles, doesn't matter which one, and begin to just simply draft your value dialogue. We'll give you about 5 minutes to do so. Make sure that you put some writing down, because you're going to have to actually read this to someone and get some coaching. So on the back of your current prospecting call plan, Section 2, just begin to draft out your value dialogue using one of those 3 styles. All right, let me pull you in. So we've chosen one of the 3 styles of value dialogue, and we've drafted our first draft of this. We said earlier that we're going to pair you up and get some coaching. Now, if you think about coaching to this, what would be some things you would want to look for in coach? So put yourself in the other person's shoes for a minute. If I'm going to get some coaching now, at one point in time, I'm going to read my value dialogue to you, and you're going to offer me some coaching. What are some things you should focus on in terms of offering some effective coaching? So let's go over here first. What do you think?
Form, because each one of them have a unique form, just to make sure that they follow the form effectively.
Yeah, so form, pattern, same thing. So as we said earlier, a lot of what we do is either in a pattern or breaking of a pattern. And so as I'm listening, did they stay true to the pattern? So that's one thing you'd want to focus on. What else would you want to listen for in coaching? Yes, back here.
Is it too long or is it too short? So too much information or not enough?
Yeah, and so is it just the right amount of information? Too long, you've lost me. Too short, you might not enable the decision, right? It might end up in a, well, I don't know, send me some information because you didn't give me enough to be able to decide. I like it. What else could you focus on coaching for here? Think back to the movie trailers. What did the movie trailers do really, really, really well? Pique interest, right? Very quickly, right? So does it create interest in you? So is it set in a way that actually created some interest in me, saying, hey, you know what, maybe I should invest some time to talk to this person. So we've got some things we want you to focus on in the coaching aspect. So you're going to be playing 2 different roles. One is getting some coaching. The other is giving some coaching, a really important role here. So we're going to ask you to find a partner. Plenty of people in the room you've not worked with yet so far today. Find a new partner. Introduce yourself. Now, very key to this, I need you to read your value dialogue word for word right off of your paper. I can't coach you and you can't redraft it if you just make something up that's not on your paper. So stick to what's on your paper, read it, get some coaching. When you're acting as that coaching role, some things that you may want to focus on, those that were said, as well as, are you creating interest? Is there something that you could say that would create more interest? Is there a way that you could say it that would create interest? Are you presenting a compelling value case for me that would make me say, hey, I might want to invest 3 or 4 minutes with you to decide if we should be talking? And are you enabling a decision, yes or no? As you said, is it too much or not enough? So very important to receive the coaching and to give the coaching. So let's jump up, find a brand new partner, introduce yourself, and share both directions and receive some coaching. Take some notes when you're receiving the coaching. All right, so you think about it, everything is coming to bear on this value dialogue, all the work we've done all day long. You have a chance to draft it, to actually speak it for the very first time, and to receive some coaching. And so let me just ask you very open-endedly, how'd that go? In terms of saying it for the first time and then getting some, hopefully some good feedback. A lot of shaking heads. It was perfect, spot on, I nailed it, good to go. We're going to pull out a telephone and have people try them right now. No. And so again, hopefully you receive some effective coaching in those 3 or 4 things that we've talked about from the movie trailer. So once we draft our value dialogue, we get some coaching. Now it's time to go back to the first part, which is actually the second part we do, and we work on the introduction. Now, again, as we said earlier, time is measured in seconds. And so we're thinking that introduction piece is like 10, 15 seconds at most. If you think about what would go into an effective introduction, what do you think we should say in that 10 or 15 seconds? Just off the top of your head, what are some things you think we should probably do inside of that 15 seconds? Over here, what would you say? Okay, so definitely my name and my company is in there, right? I like it. What else? What else would you say should be included in that introduction? Purpose for the call, right? Which we know what our end in mind is, right? What's our end in mind? Which in this case for a prospecting call is, what's the decision? Should we be talking, right? And then so that's got to be somewhere in that introduction. Is the end in mind for this call is, should we be talking? If you remember back in Maria's example, she said it 3 different ways on that page. So you don't have to say, should we be talking? You express it the way you want to express it, but that's got to be in there somewhere. Anything else? So my name, the company I'm calling from, my end in mind.
If they have time to talk.
So you're asking, right? And so you're actually asking for permission. We love that. You know, is now a good time to go into this dialogue. So I've expressed what my end in mind is. You ask for permission to go forward. And so those are some of the things that we find as well in terms of the pattern, if you will. And so once we create our value dialogue, now we're going into our introduction. And so in that introduction piece, some things to think about. Now again, your name is very obvious. And so when you think about the name, the second thing would be company and title. Now, a little caveat around title. Sometimes we have titles that really don't communicate a lot. And so when you put your title in there, try to back away from the corporate given title and really think about defining value from that person. How can I translate my specific corporate title into what may add value to you? Sometimes people will share their title and you really doesn't express what it is that you do. So don't just use the corporate given title, but really work on that to describe it in a way that adds value. The connection might be something you want to add in there in terms of we've never met, I'm calling based on a referral. Now, why would you want to say you've never met? Again, some of these are choices, you'll like it or not like it, but why would it maybe add value to say we've never met? What do you think?
They won't have any preconceived notions about you or where you're coming from.
Okay, I like it. Can you add to that?
I was gonna say, it opens that door to explore the relationship, as in from clean slate.
Okay, I like it. So think about it. If I call you, again, I've got 10, 15 seconds here. If I call you and say, hi, my name's Sean Franz, I'm calling from Franklin Covey. As soon as I say that, and we've never met, where does your mind immediately go? I'm into a prospecting call. What else? As soon as I introduce myself and we've never met, your mind might start trying to make the connection. Well, it's Sean Franz. I knew a guy named Sean. I had a roommate in college. No, his name wasn't. So as you're going through all those things in your mind, what am I doing on my end of the call? Talking. And I don't have a lot of time to say stuff. So as I'm giving you the most important part of what I'm saying, you're off in no man's land thinking about trying to figure out the connection as to how you know me. And you don't. So sometimes it may be valuable to just say, hey, my name's Sean Franz, calling from Franklin Covey. We've never had the opportunity to talk, and I think maybe we should. And so you might want to add that in there. And so as we think about these patterns, you add in what you like. You're going to draft that from that standpoint. Let's take a look at the actual patterns. Here's what I'd like you to do. Take a look over on page 36 and 37. You're going to see 3 different examples of how you may draft this introduction. Here's what I want you to do as a table. As a table, you're going to take 2 or 3 minutes to just read through page 36 and 37. You're going to see 3 very different examples. Some of it you'll like, and you'll be like, oh, I like that. Some of it you may hate. Say, man, I'd never say that. That's the discussion we actually want you to have as a table. So read through the 3 different types of opening introductions. And then as a table, once everybody's had a chance to read them, just have an open discussion about each one of them and what did you like? What really stuck out? What would you want to add in? What didn't you like very well and you can't see yourself having that in your opening statement? So read those 3 and then do some table conversations about what you like and dislike in those 3 options. All right, let me pull you back in. So as we think about this section, again, nowhere is a few seconds probably more important than at this point. We've got like 10, 15 seconds to say something that does all of the stuff we said we wanted it to say. You have a chance to read 3 different patterns, some things you like, some things you don't like. What did you like or dislike about any of those 3? Who would be willing to point something out? Raise your hand, we'll call you out. What did you like or dislike about any of those 3? Let's go over here. What'd you say?
Our table didn't like the 3rd one. It sounded way too scripted and robotic, and we would not be very open to hearing that if we were the person getting called upon.
Okay. Anything specific about it, or just the whole thing in general?
That's irony. That's what that is.
And the 3rd one.
Of the 3rd one, yeah. I don't know. It seemed way too specific,
Okay.
which I guess is counterintuitive. But if I hear that, I'm thinking that they're trying way too hard, and it's not something I'm open to.
Yeah, and again, as soon as you think about the amygdala, as soon as this amygdala picks up and says you're trying way too hard, I start to question your intent, right? What are you doing here? And so you just don't like the way that one's phrased from that standpoint. Other insights, what you liked or disliked. Let's go over here.
So our table liked both the first and second one, but we felt that the second one was shorter, and so we liked that one.
Okay. So again, it's that succinctness. I like what you said earlier. It's not too short, not too long. So you liked the brevity of the second one compared to the first one. Again, we got a very quick window here, and so you liked how clear and concise. It reminds me of that old saying, I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. To get that short and concise actually takes some work, right? And so you like the brevity of that one. What'd you think about over here?
What I didn't like as a table on both of these is that they didn't use the last name of the referenced person.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we've all been in big companies, with 100,000, 300,000 people, and they're like, do you know George?
I know 7. Which one?
Which one?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we didn't like the fact that they didn't use the last name, and we felt that the first one was kind of long.
Okay. So the first example on page 36, a little bit too long still. Okay, so a little more brief, use the second name. I like it. What else? Back in the back.
Yeah, it's interesting, we actually did gravitate to the third one because there's some actual data points that Rick was talking about in his specific experience that he could cite some results that their products could actually influence. But we also mentioned that we probably steal from number one and add to number three just to make a little bit more of a softer introduction and then get into how their products or services could impact those.
Okay, so you like the succinctness of the measurables, the 12%, get right to the point. If you think about it, there might be indications where, especially the higher up an organization you call, you better get to some data points really, really quick. And so you like that piece, but you also like the softer introduction of one from that standpoint. Good feedback. What else? Yes, back in the back.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
What's your philosophy in terms of change, if any, between live body and voicemail?
So in terms of changing this?
Yeah.
So whether I get a real person or
Yeah,
a voicemail?
Is there any change in approach at all, or is it pretty much the same thing?
Probably would pretty much be the same thing. I mean, you might want to be a little bit more brief if you get a voicemail, because again, in voicemail, it's probably even, if you've got 15 seconds live, you probably have 5 in voicemail before I just hit delete or erase or whatever. And some people would choose very specifically not to leave a voicemail. So it's really a personal preference of yourself. If I get voicemail, I'm just going to hang up. If I get directed to the executive assistant. And so again, as we think about the whole concept, Maria is planning. And so Maria probably has found value in being prepared for the live person, for the voicemail, and for the executive assistant. That I know I'm not going to allow any of those things to catch me off guard. I've done all of this up to here. Can I be really prepared for all 3 of those? And some may choose just not to leave a voicemail from that standpoint. So I love the interaction. I like this, I don't like that. I'm going to steal from 2 and add to 1 and pull 3 in and create 4. That's exactly what you're going to do now. And so if you'll go back to your prospecting call plan, it's now time to put all that together to create your introduction based on all those things you liked and disliked. So we have now drafted our value dialogue. So here's what we're going to do at this point in time. I'm going to give you a little more time to do this. I want you to draft, for the first time, your introduction. When you finish that, I want you to redraft your value dialogue. You've said it once. You got hopefully some good coaching. If not, we'll get you a better coach next time. We apologize. You'll work with a different person. So draft for the first time your intro, redraft your value dialogue, and then we're going to have you find a brand new person and do the whole thing from beginning to end and get some more coaching. And so since we're doing both sections here, we'll give you some more time to be able to do that. So you'll have at least 5 minutes. If you have any questions, again, raise your hand. I'll come around and help you out. So draft our intro, redraft our value dialogue. All right, let's take this last step. So if you take a look at the screen up here, we're going to, we have now drafted for the first time our intro, taken from all of those different parts, the things we liked and leaving out what we disliked. We've redrafted our value dialogue based on some feedback and coaching we've got. So now we've got a new script from beginning to end. We're going to find a brand new partner, someone you've not worked with today. You're getting to meet lots of new people. Hopefully you're getting a business card exchange in there while you're doing this, right? Building that network. Find a brand new partner and go from beginning to end, right through from that standpoint. Now again, really important is the coaching and feedback. So same criteria. Are you creating interest? Are you presenting compelling value? And are you enabling a decision? So find a new partner, work through these. Again, we'll give you probably 6 or 7 minutes to be able to go through both sides. Offer some very specific coaching. Find a brand new person. All right, so you have now drafted and redrafted your value dialogue. You've had a chance to draft and receive some coaching on your introduction. You now should have a pretty good idea of what your opening statement as a whole is going to sound like. So let's think about reality. We've worked on this client all day long. They were the top on your prioritized tool. You thought about it in terms of thinking in their mindset and creating value from them. You've drafted this thinking about them. You're going to go out and pick up the call. You should probably expect this to go right through and set the appointment immediately, right? You're laughing. Why are you laughing? And so if you think about how this actually flows, you're going to actually get, if you get him on the phone or if you send an email, however you do it, you're going to put that introduction piece out there and what may happen at that point in time. Say that again. A yellow light, right? So if you think about it, I might put my introduction out there, that 10 or 15 seconds, and I may receive a yellow light. Any one of those ones we practice, right? Well, it sounds great. I just don't have time right now. Or no thank you, or can you send me some stuff in the mail? That's probably more likely the scenario than them just going right into your value dialogue. Oh, sounds fantastic. Tell me what you got. And so if you think about it, you're literally just journeying in and out of yellow lights as you go through this, to the point where if you get all the way through, it actually makes sense for us to talk. At that point in time, there's one last step of the prospecting call plan. So if you take a look at the back side of your prospecting call plan, all the way at the bottom, you see a section called preconditioning. What do you think we mean by preconditioning? Go ahead. Well, when you say qualifying, what do you mean by qualifying?
We're going to ask more specific, directed questions
When?
to get information.
So I've gone through my value dialogue. You have said, yes, we should meet. And you want to send them, you know what, let's get together for a half an hour next Thursday at 2. So are you saying you want to ask more questions now? What do you think we mean by preconditioning? So the client has said, yes, let's meet. Actually, I see the value you're talking about. It's definitely worth at least a half an hour dialogue. So I've said, let's meet. What do you think preconditioning means?
Begin to start setting the agenda and expectations.
Yeah, so right then, I've got you on the phone. So you've said yes to me, and it's that one or two last questions. Just say, hey, look at the exact language on the form itself. It's given to you for that reason on the sheet. Hey, when your client says yes to the meeting, in our upcoming meeting next Tuesday at 2, what 2 or 3 things would you like to cover? I'm taking advantage of the fact that I've got you on the phone now to start drafting the agenda and the key points I want to talk about next week when I get to you. And so take that opportunity. So if you take a look in your book on page 30, you see that right at the very top. It says, remember, the end in mind for the value call is to determine should we be talking. If your client says yes to a meeting, ask very simply, in that meeting, what 2 or 3 things would you like us to cover? Now again, you don't turn that into a let's draft the whole meeting. It's just very, very quick while I got you on the phone. And then you see towards the bottom of page 38, a further description of what we call preconditioning. Now, I've hung up the phone. We've got a meeting next Tuesday. I got a pretty good idea of what I want to talk about. You see on page 38 this concept of preconditioning. Now, this is typically an email that goes out beforehand just to precondition the upcoming meeting. What do you think would be some things that you could put into that email? So we've got an appointment coming up next Tuesday. I just want to send a really quick email. What do you think are some things that could be included in that email? So based on what you've said we should cover, I want to recommend an agenda, right? How many times have you been in meetings that didn't have an agenda? And so put an agenda forward, a proposed agenda. What else might be effective in the preconditioning? Back here.
End in mind.
The end in mind, right? So the end in mind for our prospecting call was should we be talking? The end in mind for this call is should we keep talking? Let's just get together for a half an hour, discuss this in more detail so that we can figure out if you and I should continue talking or not. And so you put the end in mind in there. And so you see some of those things right on page 38. You even see an example Maria has here in terms of an email. You're just putting those things out there and you're saying, hey, any thoughts, any pushback, let me know now. If not, I'll see you next Tuesday. Because think about it, when you send this preconditioning email out with all that thinking in it, what do you think your response typically is? Put all this thinking in, you send it out. What do you think the response is you get back most of the time? Sounds good. Great. Thanks. Perfect. See you then. Awesome. Right on. But every once in a while, what do you think you might hear back?
No.
Well, do you think anybody ever sets an appointment just to get you off the phone? Right? And then you're going to actually drive all the way over there, have this call, and they really don't have an interest. And so when you send this preconditioning, that might be that time where they say, well, or that end in mind's not what, or that agenda. And so it just gives them a chance to buy into that meeting again from that standpoint. So that preconditioning we find very, very valuable from that standpoint. So if you think about where we are at this point, once we precondition, we have pretty much finished up our planning portion. We've focused on our end in mind, our questions, our yellow lights, and our opening statement, both parts of the opening statement. As we finish up our prospecting call plan, that actually finishes up the whole skill sets and tool sets section of our day. So we started with the concept of rethinking our funnel, and intent counts more than technique. We spent the afternoon focused on prioritizing, preparing, and planning. We put that all together into the opening statement that you just created. So here's what we want you to do now. I'd like you to go all the way back to the beginning of the day. And you're going to be back on page 4. Take a look at page 4. So if you think about your opening statement, you just drafted, redrafted, tested, and got coaching on. This is going to be the after. This is going to be the before. And so we want you to do a little bit of a self-diagnosis. Just go back and read your best shot. As you read it, again, we're not going to share this with anybody. Just think to yourself in terms of reading this versus this. What do I notice? What's different about the two? What do I like about this that I didn't like about this? What did I like about this? We're not saying it's not going to be great. So just look at the two, read over them, and just do a little bit of a critical self-analysis. What's different about the two? Take some notes for yourself, and then we're going to do a table discussion about that. So let me give you a minute or two just to read through both of them. All right, so let's hear some critical self-analysis. So as you take a look at your best shot in the morning, you take a look at your opening statement in the end, you compare the two. Again, you may like your best shot in the morning. It was your best shot after all. And so what did you think as you read through the two? What did you just observe as differences between the two? Who'd be willing to share an idea or a thought? Okay, let's go over here.
So my best shot in the morning, I had the introduction and then at the beginning, and then the ask for permission or ask for time at the end.
Okay.
But the middle portion of it was really more of a relationship or a start of building a conversation, a relationship, something a little more personal.
Okay.
And it didn't really have the value statement in
Okay.
it. So by keeping, the introduction and the ask for time and then slotting in the value statement, I think it sounds a lot more powerful.
Okay, and again, not as if going for the relationship is not a value, right? And so it's just, what's the relationship based upon? And so if I put a little bit more in there about the value I think I can create for you, that might be a step forward. I like it. What else? What else did you notice between the two, comparing them? Let's go over here.
Mine was more about setting the appointment than it was figuring out whether we should be talking or not.
Okay, so if we go all the way back to intent, your intent was about setting the appointment. And so again, as we said earlier, the amygdala may sense that. And so as the person hears you, our intent is expressed through the words that we use. As I say those chosen words, pushing for the appointment, I'm going to get some resistance to that, versus just having the end in mind being, should we be talking? I like that. What else? What else did you notice between the two? Let's go back there.
I would say the morning, the first statement that I had was, I would say it's like number 3 that we talked before.
Okay.
It was more straight, this is who I am, this is what we do,
Mm-hmm.
can we talk or can we help? I think one thing I liked was take a pause, introduce yourself and tell whether I know the person or not know the person, or how do I even get to him.
Yeah.
At least I would say like start a little slow, and rather than telling means how can I help you or can we talk, I would say just leave it at a point where very softly, this is the kind of thing we do, can we talk or do you think we can? So it's a little bit very passive now compared to the morning one.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there may be things that you liked a lot in your morning one from that standpoint. So we're not saying it's a good or a bad thing. It's just the differences between the two. So thanks for sharing those. So as we wrap up that section and look at the concept of developing our opening statement and finishing up the prospecting call plan, let's go all the way back into the beginning of the day and think about where this all started. And so if we go all the way back to the beginning of the day, we focused on something. We said, you hear about cold calling and warm calling and social calling. We said we're going to focus on what? So remember what we called this whole process? Value calling, right? And so when you think back to that concept of value calling, we had a very different idea of what value calling was. We shared the definition with you. What do you remember as kind of points or takeaways just about the concept of value calling? What do you remember as we discussed that? What were some points or takeaways just about the concept of value calling? What was different? Barbara?
Mutual value in the call.
Okay, so the purpose is to create to see if we can create mutual value. So it's not just value for me, nor is it just value for you, it's mutual value. What else do you remember from that? Yes, let's go back here.
Or not, leaving the no as an option.
Yeah, very different than what a lot of people are used to. So it's or not. So this purpose of this call is to decide whether or not we should be talking. What else? Yes, over here.
It's a targeted prospect.
Yeah. So that whole prioritization using reason versus random, all those. Anything else in the concept of value calling? Back here in the back.
I think the intent, what is our personal intent when we're making that call to this client?
Okay. Which connects back to the why, right? And so that was, as you just shared, it was really about getting the appointment versus just enabling a yes or a no decision from that standpoint. So as we go back, we think about communicating. Again, we talked about that being a dialogue, right? And if you think about a lot of the different models, in the stop is the model. You create 3 things you should stop. Would you find value in that? Yes or no. It's a very closed-ended question on purpose, yes or no. And then when they say yes or no, that's when the dialogue starts. Well, how so or why not? And it gets into that communication with a targeted prospect with the intent to explore whether or not mutual value can be created. And so the whole day was about the mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets that Maria has learned to adapt to this whole concept of value calling. So if you will, in your book, towards the end of the day, there is a pullout, if you will. It's right before the playbook starts. You actually see it pull out. And it's actually the model of the entire day. So if you think about the journey we've been on, the whole model is exemplified there on that chart. If you look up in the very upper left-hand corner of the model, you see that the day started with the concepts of mindsets of value calling. Some ways that Maria learned to rethink about business. And so what I would like you to do is have a discussion at your table specifically about those two mindsets in terms of what are your thoughts or takeaways. So we spent the whole day on them. Just do a very brief table discussion about what are your key thoughts and takeaways about rethinking the funnel and intent counts more than technique. So let me just have someone at each table start a dialogue. What are your key points, thoughts, takeaways when it comes to those two mindsets? Okay, let me pause you for just a moment. Let me pull you in. I hate to interrupt the dialogue. I just want to change the dialogue. So that's focusing on the two mindsets. When we focused on those, we then shifted our energies to the three skill sets of value calling. And so we address prioritize, prepare, and plan. And so now just shift your dialogue from the mindsets that you were just discussing to the critical points and takeaways of the skill sets. And so jump right back into your dialogue, focused on the skill sets of value calling. All right, let me pull you in. So we focused on the mindsets, then we turned our discussion to the skill sets, and we ended the day specifically investing a lot of time in the concept of preparing and planning. And so Maria then learned the effectiveness of putting some time into the concept of planning. We walked through the 4 sections of end in mind, questions, yellow lights, and eventually opening statements. And as we said, if you look on the model on page 39 on that pullout, there was actually a model involved in the effective application of the opening statement. And so if you look at that model, you see it just flow through. I'm going to start with my introduction. In my introduction, it may flow right into my value dialogue, or it may not. If it doesn't, I go out into yellow lights. I offer an acknowledgement and a resolve, and hopefully pull them back into the introduction, into the value dialogue. If not, I exit gracefully. They may say, I don't have time, and I don't have time, thank you, and it's over at that point in time. And you exit gracefully. Or it may be able to get you back into the value dialogue. You go through the value dialogue, again, you may get a yellow light. You venture out into handling it, trying to bring it back in, eventually setting the appointment and remembering to precondition at that point in time. And so it was all about effectively planning that process. That brings us all the way back to the beginning of the day to what we stated was our end in mind as we started this day of our journey. And the end in mind was very clear, and it was to simply make a significant improvement in our prospecting pipeline. And so we said it wasn't about today, it was really about the 12-week journey. And so if we think about that end in mind, Franklin Covey has worked with, as we said, thousands and thousands and thousands of professional salespeople all over the world for a number of years. We've had a chance to work with the best of the best to figure out what is it that they do. Very much like the conversations I had with some of you at lunchtime. Hey, we were talking about that part, and that's what I do. That's where we learned this stuff from the best of the best and listening to what they do. We've put that into the form of this playbook. And so if you think about the playbook, the 12-week journey that we're going to have you go through and the implementation of everything that we've discussed from this point today. And so as we think about that playbook, it's going to focus on all of the different resources. We said all of the videos that we're asking you to use are included on the thumb drive that you have. Some of you receive that in a CD-ROM, and they're on there. All of the resources you've been given to be able to jump into that playbook, obviously starting on week 1. And so here's what I'd like you to do. If you'll turn in your playbook to actual week 1, and you take a look at that second action point. Can I get someone to volunteer to read that second action point for me in week 1? Anyone want to? Okay, up here.
Review your participant guide and notes from your work session. Create an action item list of the best ideas to guide you through this 12-week journey. Select 2 items from the list to implement this week.
select 2 items. Why do you think the number 2? Why not select 10 items to focus on this week? It's achievable, right? It's too much, you're just not going to do it, right? And so what we want you to focus on in week 1 is just 2 things. It's fresh of mind. We've been through the whole process today. What I'd like you to do is right now actually think of those 2 things. So thinking about everything we've done so far today, you just went over with your table all of the mindsets we've talked about, the key things that you remember from them, the skill sets. What I would like you to do right now while it's fresh in your memory is to pick those 2 things right now. And on your playbook, on tab 1, I would like you to actually reference those above that action item list. What are the 2 things, not all of this, just 2, that you want to focus on implementing during week 1 of this journey? And so let me give you a minute or 2 to just think through everything today and just pick 2 things, 2 simple things you want to focus on during week 1. All right, who would volunteer just one of the 2 things that you've chosen on? So of everything we've talked about today, what rises to the surface for you that in the first week of the implementation playbook, this is what I want to focus on? Who would share what they wrote down? All right, over here, what'd you say?
The prioritization tool to
Okay.
reprioritize my accounts.
Okay, why that one? What stood out for that one for you?
Because right now I have a pool or a list of prospects.
Okay.
And I'm just calling through them with really, hopefully trying to drum up a meeting, but this will help me refocus. And then using the prospecting call plan to be very specific.
Okay, so I've got a whole pool of people, just calling on them kind of in that randomization that we talked about. And so I want to use the prioritize tool to really think about how to effectively call upon them. Love it. Who else would share something? What's the one thing that rose to the top for you? Go ahead, over here.
Tap into my network for introductions. So I have I guess a large network on LinkedIn, and our company's enormous, and I very rarely use it, and it's something that I should definitely start doing.
Yeah, if you remember the statistics, what was the statistic if I can get an in-company referral? Does anyone remember that number? 84% likelihood that the executive would take the call. So it's a fascinating study, by the way. If you want to really, the reference is right on that page. If you want to go back and look at that, some really interesting data about the power of getting that referral. So we've got the prioritize tool, really establishing, I've got the network, I just have to more effectively use it. One more, what's something you say just rises to the top? That's what I want to focus on during this first week. Back in the back.
I'm going to identify the yellow lights in my business, and then my response to those yellow lights so that I'm prepared when they come up.
Okay, and then practice them a whole bunch of times, right? So absolutely. Yeah, so it's the practicing of those. And again, you got those cards, use them. Just again, if you're in intact teams, call people up, throw one at them, just see, because you want that response to just be the way that you respond. It's not something I think about, it's just the way that I respond to things, and that takes some practice. So if you think about the journey that we've been on today, a closing thought for you to think about is that although this is the end of the day, it's also the beginning of a process. And so if you think about it, it's the end of the training, but it's actually the beginning of the journey. And so you've got the 12-week playbook in front of you. We wish you the best of success as you enter into this journey from this point forward. Thanks for being here today.